What if the person going cold on you is not losing interest at all, but fighting a silent battle the moment things start to feel real? What if their distance is not a final answer, but a sign that something inside them is shaking, resisting, and still pulling them back toward you at the same time? Most people walk away too early because they only read the silence. They only see the space, they only feel the confusion, but sometimes the truth is hidden inside the pattern, and if you miss that pattern, you miss the whole story, because not every person who steps back is done with you. Some are overwhelmed by what they feel, some are scared by how much it matters, and some are trying to stay connected while also trying not to lose control of themselves. That is where this gets complicated, and that is why you need to watch closely, not just what they say, not just what they promise, but what keeps repeating, what keeps returning, and what quietly changes over time. Stay with me, because the signs are not always loud, but they are there, and if you understand them, you may finally see the difference between someone who is avoiding you and someone who is avoiding what they feel when they are close to you. That difference changes everything, and the next part may explain more than you expected. Consistency with an avoidant person almost never looks like steady closeness. It does not usually come in a smooth line. It comes in waves, in returns, in quiet reappearances after distance that made you question everything. At first, that distance can feel personal. It can feel like rejection, like every step back is proof that your place in their heart is smaller than you hoped. But if you slow down and really watch, another pattern begins to show. They leave, but they do not fully vanish. They take space, but something keeps pulling them back in your direction. That return matters. It is not random. It is not empty. It often shows an inner struggle they still do not know how to handle. A person like this does not always back away because the bond means nothing. Many times they back away because the bond means too much. And that level of closeness wakes up feelings they are not ready to carry for long. So when they come back, even in a small way, even through a short message, a careful check-in, a quiet attempt to reconnect, it can reflect a real push and pull inside them. Indifference does not keep circling back to what it has already thrown away. Real emotional weight does. But here is the key. The return alone is not enough. What matters is whether those returns show any shift at all. A little more openness, a little less hiding, a little more presence than before. That is when the pattern begins to mean something deeper. Subtle vulnerability in a guarded person rarely arrives in a clear and easy way. It does not walk in and announce itself. It slips out in fragments, in half-finished sentences, in a pause that lasts a second too long, in a moment where they almost say something honest, then quickly cover it up. If you are only looking for obvious emotional speech, you may miss it completely. You may think nothing important happened when in reality, something very important almost broke through. Many avoidant people learned long ago that showing emotion comes with danger. To open up feels risky. To reveal too much feels like losing control, so they build a version of themselves that seems calm, distant, self-contained, and hard to read. But no wall is perfect. Under that structure, real feeling still exists, and sometimes it presses just hard enough to become visible. You may hear it in a quick truth, spoken without detail. You may feel it in the way certain topics change their tone. You may notice it in silence that feels heavy, not empty. These moments do not last long. Often they pull away right after, almost as if they regret being seen. That creates confusion. You get a glimpse of warmth, then cold again. You get closeness, then closure. But do not overlook the opening just because it was brief. The meaning is not in how dramatic it was. The meaning is in the fact that it happened at all. For someone who hides by instinct, even a small crack in the armor can say more than a long speech from someone else. And this next part is where many people misread the whole situation. Effort from an avoidant person often speaks a language most people are not trained to hear. It is usually not wrapped in big emotional talks, long reassurance, or constant words of affection. Instead, it moves through action, quiet action, small action, the kind that is easy to dismiss if you are only listening for romantic lines. They may not tell you directly that you matter, but they show up when something important happens. They may not speak deeply about care, but they remember details you thought they ignored. They may not make grand gestures, yet they adjust parts of their routine to make space for you in their life. This is where interpretation becomes important, because words feel clean, words feel clear, Actions can feel softer, harder to trust, easier to question. But with a guarded person, behavior often tells the deeper story. They make time, even when distance is their comfort zone. They respond when it counts, even if their style is awkward. They stay present a little longer than they used to. None of this is loud, but it is not meaningless. What gives these actions value is that they often go against the person's natural defense. If someone's instinct is to detach, then even a small move toward connection can take real internal effort. Still, effort must grow to stay meaningful. If it stays tiny forever, if it becomes a cycle of crumbs with no expansion, then eventually it loses its weight. Real effort does not need to be perfect, but it should slowly become more visible, more steady, more alive. If that growth is missing, the pattern may be habit, not healing, and that is a difference you cannot afford to ignore. Fear in a person like this does not usually look like fear on the surface. It often looks like independence, like coolness, like distance, like someone saying they just need space, want less pressure, or prefer things simple. That is why it is so often mistaken for not caring. But underneath that surface, there may be something much more intense, a nervous system that learned to connect closeness with overwhelm, a mind that feels exposed the moment feelings become too real. So when they start pulling back, it is not always because the connection has lost value. Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes the bond begins to matter more, and that is exactly what activates the old alarm inside them. Intimacy can feel like standing too close to a fire they do not know how to control. It can wake emotions they cannot sort through. It can bring up needs, memories, fear, and vulnerability they would rather not face. So they create distance to calm themselves down. Not because you are worthless to them, but because what they feel around you is suddenly bigger than what they know how to manage. This is why the withdrawal can feel sudden. One moment things seem close, the next they are quiet, distant, hard to reach. To the person on the receiving end, it feels like a disappearing act. But if fear is the engine and not indifference, traces of that truth often remain. There is hesitation instead of finality. There is restraint instead of complete emotional death. Something still seems alive underneath the distance. And if you have ever felt that strange mix of closeness and retreat, keep listening, because the next layer explains why trust can grow slowly even when the pattern still looks messy. Trust does not appear all at once in a guarded heart. It builds slowly, carefully, almost unwillingly, as if every new step has to get approval from the part of them that still fears closeness. In the beginning, their connection may feel very controlled, measured, limited. They reveal only what feels safe. They keep the deeper rooms inside themselves locked. But over time, if something real is growing, small changes begin to appear, not dramatic changes, not some movie scene where everything opens in one night. More often it looks like this. They stay in hard conversations a little longer. They share a little more than before. The wall does not vanish, but it moves back a few inches. The distance that once showed up instantly takes a bit longer to appear. Their need to pull away becomes less sharp, less absolute. They still struggle, but now you can feel that they are trying not only to escape the connection, but also to remain inside it without getting flooded. That matters. Trust in this kind of dynamic is not measured by perfection, it is measured by direction. Are they becoming a little more honest, a little more present, a little less reactive when closeness rises? Those are real signs. Those small shifts are how inner change first becomes visible, but patience must never become blindness. If month after month nothing moves, if every cycle resets to the exact same place, then what looked like slow growth may actually be stagnation. Real trust leaves evidence, however soft, however gradual, it leaves a trail. And when you know how to read that trail, you stop confusing endless waiting with meaningful progress. Respect for your boundaries is one of the clearest signs to watch, especially with someone who easily feels pressured by closeness. On the surface, respecting boundaries may seem basic. It should be normal in any healthy bond. But with a person who protects themselves through distance, the way they respond to your limits tells you a lot. It shows whether they can make room for your reality while still dealing with their own fear. When you speak up about what you need, maybe clarity, maybe steadiness, maybe honesty, maybe space of your own, they are faced with a choice. They can disappear further, or they can try, even imperfectly, to adjust enough to keep the connection alive. If they respect what you said, even in small ways, that is meaningful. It means they are not operating only from self-protection. It means they are becoming aware that there are two people in this connection, not just one nervous system trying to stay comfortable. That respect may not always come with perfect language. It may show up through restraint, through remembering a line you asked them not to cross, through answering when something important needs a response, through making small changes that show your experience matters. These are quiet signals, but they count. Still, respect must be repeated to carry real value. If your boundaries are honored one day and ignored the next, then the pattern becomes unstable again. True respect does not demand flawless behavior, but it does require some reliability. If they can hold your limits in mind while still feeling close to you, that shows more emotional presence than many people realize. And yes, there is another sign that often gets overlooked, and it may be one of the most powerful of all. Moments of genuine presence carry unusual weight when they come from someone who is often distant. At first, these moments may look small: a calm talk, a shared silence, a stretch of time where they seem fully there and not halfway out the door. But when a person who usually guards themselves becomes truly present, even briefly, something important is happening. For that moment, the defense softens. The scanning stops. The need to manage distance relaxes. And what shows up is a version of them that feels grounded, open, and real in a way they may not be able to hold for long. You may notice it in how they listen. They are not distracted. They are not deflecting. They are not hiding behind jokes, coldness, or silence that shuts you out. They respond with steadiness. They stay with the moment. They let the connection breathe. That kind of presence is not nothing. It shows you that closeness is not beyond their ability. It only shows that they struggle to remain there for long periods without getting uncomfortable. The challenge is that these moments can be followed by distance again. That is what makes them confusing. You start wondering if it was real or if you imagined the depth. But real presence does not lose meaning just because it was brief. If it felt sincere, and if their later actions do not fully contradict it, then it likely revealed something true beneath the surface. Over time, these moments may also begin to change. They may come a little more often, last a little longer, feel less fragile. And when that happens, you are not just seeing isolated warmth anymore. You are seeing the beginning of stability trying to form. Inside an avoidant pattern, there is often a hidden war that other people never see. One part wants connection, wants closeness, wants the comfort of being understood and chosen. Another part feels threatened by that same closeness and pulls the alarm the second things get too deep. So the person moves toward you, then away, opens up, then closes down, reaches for the bond, then runs from the pressure of what the bond awakens. From the outside, this can look like contradiction. It can look confusing, unfair, even cold. But from the inside, it often feels like conflict, real conflict. You may begin to notice it if you stop looking only at the outer behavior and start reading the tension underneath it. There may be a pause before they withdraw, as if something inside them is debating whether to stay. There may be moments when they almost tell the truth, then change the subject at the last second. There may be distance that feels heavy, not empty, as if they are not fully choosing it but being driven by something they still do not know how to control. That matters because if there were only avoidance, there would be no return, no hesitation, no warmth. And if there were only desire, there would be no repeated retreat. The fact that both exist tells you that emotional life is present but divided. Now here is the important part. Inner conflict only means something if it leads somewhere. If the same loop repeats without any shift, then it is no longer a process of growth. It becomes a prison. Friction should create movement. If it creates nothing, then you are not watching healing, you are watching repetition. And this is where your own clarity becomes just as important as their struggle. It is easy to become so focused on reading their signs that you forget to read your own experience. But your body knows when something is slowly growing and when something is only slowly draining you. That matters. A connection can be complicated and still healthy if there is movement, care, respect, and increasing honesty. But if you are always anxious, always decoding, always surviving on tiny moments while the overall pattern stays painful, then no amount of hidden depth can make that safe for you. A meaningful bond should not require you to abandon your self-respect just to understand another person's fear. This is why patience must have standards. Compassion must have limits. You can hold space for someone's struggle without making your whole life a waiting room for their readiness. Ask yourself the real questions. Are they becoming more accountable over time? Are they more aware of how their distance affects you? Are they showing growth in action, not just chemistry in isolated moments? Are they trying to build something, even if slowly, or only returning when loneliness, guilt, or comfort pulls them back? This part is important, so do not skip it. Signs only matter when they point somewhere real. If nothing expands, if nothing softens, if the same pain keeps repeating with a different excuse each time, then what you are holding may be hope, not progress. And hope, without evidence, can keep people stuck far longer than love ever should. Still, when the signs are real, they usually begin to gather in small but visible ways. The returns become less random and more intentional. The emotional openings become less rare and slightly easier to hold. Effort stops being only reactive and starts becoming chosen. They begin to communicate before disappearing, or at least repair more honestly afterward. They remember what matters to you. They try to understand your side instead of making everything about their need for space. They stay through a little more discomfort than before. That is when the connection starts to shift from confusion into cautious possibility. It is not magic, it is not instant, but it is movement. And movement is what separates a fearful pattern from a dead end. You may still see setbacks. You may still see days when they go quiet, become guarded, or need room. But now there is context. Now there is a clearer thread running through the behavior. The thread says, I am struggling, but I am not gone. I am afraid, but I am trying. I do not know how to do this perfectly, but I am no longer pretending the bond means nothing. That kind of shift is quiet, but powerful. It does not erase the difficulty, yet it changes the direction. And direction is everything, because a hard connection that is moving forward is very different from a hard connection that is only moving in circles. If you are still with me, then you already know this is not about chasing mixed signals. It is about learning to tell the difference between fear that is slowly healing and distance that is simply repeating itself. So if you are wondering whether to keep trying, do not look for fantasy, look for patterns, look for signs that the person is not just coming back, but coming back with a little more truth, a little more care, a little more ability to stay. Look for effort that grows, look for presence that feels real, look for boundaries that are respected, look for trust that expands even slowly, look for conflict that creates change instead of excuses, and just as importantly, look at what all of this is doing to you. Because the right kind of patience should make you wiser, not emptier. The right kind of love should challenge you, but not erase you. Yes, some people withdraw because they do not care enough. That is true. But some withdraw because they care more than they know how to handle, and their fear keeps interrupting what their heart has not fully learned to hold. Your job is not to rescue them from themselves. Your job is to see clearly, to notice whether their actions reveal real movement or only emotional weather, to understand whether this bond is slowly becoming safer, stronger, and more mutual, or whether it is feeding on uncertainty without ever transforming. That answer will not come from one text, one warm night, or one return after silence. It will come from the pattern, always the pattern, and if the pattern shows honest growth, steady effort, and increasing emotional courage, then maybe there is something here worth staying for. But if the pattern keeps asking you to bleed while calling it patience, then clarity is your answer. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is finally stop waiting.